Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. It is Victor Shi right here. It is Friday, January 13th, which interpret that how you want. Maybe it's a bad omen day, maybe it's a good omen day. I'm going to use this as I'm not going to let that affect me. It is Friday the 13th, but we are still living and we are still going to have a good Friday. It's been nearly a week since Kevin McCarthy got elected as the Speaker of the House, and it's been a week that has had plenty of news as well. This week we saw on full display what the Republican Party is focused on doing over the next 2 years, or maybe not focused on doing, and that is it's not helping the American people or introducing any real policy proposals. It's overturning rights and launching truly ridiculous investigations into Biden and his administration. And so today we're going to talk about, what we should be making of this. How should Democrats be talking about Republicans heading into 2024? What will it take for Americans to wake up to this reality and vote the Republicans out of office? There are lots of questions that I think we want to break down today after a week of seeing Republicans trying to govern and I think really making, again, this fool out of this institution, which is supposed to be the world's most deliberative legislative body. And so we're going to talk about all of that with our guest, Kurt Bardella, who should be joining any moment. But before we get to that, I want to get to some of the news of the day. This morning, right before we went on air, the New York officials charged the Trump organization with $1.6 million in fees. Now, that's the maximum under New York state law, which is, I think, hard to believe because for an organization as big as the Trump organization, and I think as that has as much scope and resources as that, it's like a penny to them. I mean, it's truly nothing. Alan Weisselberg got about 100 days in prison. I mean, for a company that has had, I think, 15 years of history of cheating people, of committing financial wrongdoing, I think it's a very, very lenient sentencing. So we'll see what happens from here. But I just hope that Trump gets convicted. And I'm told that we have our guest, Kurt Bardella, with us right here. I'm sure all of you know Kurt. He is such an important voice in this pro-democracy movement. He's an MSNBC political analyst, a columnist for the LA Times, and so much more. Kurt, it's so great to see you this morning. Thanks so much for being with you.
Thanks for having me on, buddy. Happy New Year.
So Happy New Year. Yeah. So I want to start off by asking you about George Santos. So far, we've seen Republican lawmakers in New York and even the Nassau County GOP come out and call on his resignation. But in the House, I think it's only about 5 to 6 Republicans who have said that they want George Santos to resign. This is a man who's been fabricating his entire resume, is under investigation on multiple levels. Help us make sense of this complete refusal from the broader Republican Party in Congress right now to call in his resignation.
Well, it comes down to numbers. If the Republicans in Congress had a 20, 30, 40 seat majority, as they had predicted that they would last year, instead of the 4 or 5 seat majority they have right now, they would all be on the dump Santos bandwagon. But because they have such narrow margins, Kevin McCarthy has made it very clear that he's not going to move against Santos. He's going to appoint him to some congressional committees. They hide behind the line, well, it's really between the voters and Santos. Never mind the fact that Santos completely lied to his voters, and so they did not have the opportunity to make an informed decision. But it really just goes to show how desperate Kevin McCarthy is to hold on to power, that he's willing to keep someone like this in Congress, in his conference, and in fact to reward him with congressional committee assignments, knowing everything that we know about Santos and the level and totality of the fraud that he's perpetrated against his constituencies.
Absolutely. I think it's important to remember that Republicans have really normalized what George Santos has done, and that's lying. You once worked for Republicans. I'm wondering if you can explain to our audience briefly how the party got to this moment, that something as fundamental as truth and just telling the truth simply has no place in the party anymore.
Well, I think the real change was nominating and making your standard bearer someone like Donald Trump, who lies just as easily as he breathes.
Yeah.
On his first day in office, he lied about the crowd size that was at his inauguration, and once you do that from the White House podium, I remember Sean Spicer having to go out there and say these nonsense things and defend these nonsense things, and the lies would just continue on from there and culminate with obviously the big lie that led to an insurrection effort on January 6th. Like once you cross that lexicon, there's really no going back from that. And how comfortable the entirety of the Republican Party is now with lying, with fabrication,
Right.
and we've just seen it bleed into so many other things outside of just probably even just the response to the COVID pandemic. On the Republican side was really predicated on lies about health,
Hmm.
science,
Hmm.
doctors, medicine, and it's only grown from there.
So I've been trying to figure this out. I mean, how much of their unwillingness to just say the right thing, to come out and acknowledge what happened on January 6th, to call out George Santos for his lies, to just tell the truth, is based off of, I think, maybe their personal kind of egos, and how much is it based off of maybe like that their fear that, I guess maybe they're scared of the broader Republican electorate and what they're going to do to them if they do come out and vote, for common sense policies and call out January 6th. How much of it is like themselves individually, or do you think it's more maybe the broader Republican electorate and that's too late to do what Republicans once did, and that's, actually stick to truly conservative principles and stick to facts?
I think overall, the majority of what we see from Republicans and how they react to things is all performative. And
Hmm.
it's all
Hmm.
coming from that place of fear. And we know that by the audio that came out in the wake of January 6th about some
Yeah.
of the things that Kevin McCarthy said about Donald Trump, about how he was responsible and need to be held responsible. And then how a couple weeks later he walked that back as he went to Mar-a-Lago to kiss the ring. And so we know that internally, when left to their own devices and when they think they're having private conversations, the Republicans say the same things that we all say.
Yeah.
They've all said,
Hmm.
"Oh, yeah, Donald Trump's crazy." That these bad actors like the Alex Joneses and the extremists are, they drive them nuts. I remember Mitch McConnell, hoping that Democrats would do the job of impeaching Donald Trump for him, so he wouldn't have to deal with them ever again.
Right. Right.
There are a few true believe crazy people. I believe Marjorie Taylor Greene believes what she says because she's nuts. I believe that Lauren Boebert believes what she says because she's crazy. There's always that element of it, but
Hmm.
by and large, I think the majority of people that are in Congress and Republican politics, they don't for a second believe anything that they say publicly.
I mean, that's the most cynical part, is that they know what they're saying is false, and yet they still keep on saying it. I want to turn to what we're seeing in the House this week. It's been a nearly a complete week since Kevin McCarthy got elected as Speaker. And to me and a lot of young people who I talk to, it seems like pure chaos, and that the Republican Party hasn't learned from any of the lessons from 2022 and what voters went out there and told and kind of made their voices heard. Walk us through what you think should raise alarm bells from this week with respect to the Republican Party and some of the things that they've done this week.
Well, the fact that, after an election in which they all spent time talking about, whether it's the economy, inflation, gas prices, crime, the first act from this Republican majority in the House has nothing to do with any of those things.
Yeah.
What they have done is instead, made it easier for extremists to, have power in
Hmm.
Congress. The same
Hmm.
extremists that were rejected by the majority of voters that when they ran on the ballots in November, they've launched these investigations and these new committees designed to really just go after their political adversaries. There is no appetite amongst American people for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything they've done is the complete opposite of what they campaigned on. And I just think it's a losing recipe when suffer a historic level underperformance way that Republicans did in November, and your answer to that is to double down on the
Yeah.
crazy. Uh, I mean, there's only it's a pattern that we've now seen repeat itself after 2018, after 2020, and after 2022. And every time we always hear the same thing: "Oh, Republicans, they're going to do this autopsy. The RNC is going to look at what went wrong,"
Right.
and it's like I don't think the answer is investigating Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, there is no appetite for this. It's shocking, but I mean, polls show that most Americans don't want to see this craziness and want to see normalcy. Who do you think benefits from what's going on right now? I mean, is there something that they know that we don't know? I mean, why do you think they're doing things that are so apparently against their self-interest and what the American people actually want?
I think it's just because this remarkable act of self-sabotage is just, again, it's a pattern that they've been stuck in ever since Donald Trump came onto the scene, and they just
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
unwilling to divorce themselves from that because if they do that, there will be political casualties on their side. Their
Yeah.
base will turn
Yeah.
on some of them, and I think that they don't want to risk losing what they currently have, even at the expense of growing
Yeah.
and overperforming. They're content to just keep losing as long as some of these people get to stay in power, I guess.
So, I mean, as we're paying attention to what's happening in the House, there's been little coverage about what's happening in the Senate. I'm wondering if you can shed light on any insight that you have on how unified Republicans are in the Senate and what you think Mitch McConnell is thinking about Kevin McCarthy and what's happening in the House right now.
I think Mitch McConnell thinks Kevin McCarthy is a clown. I think that the majority of the Senate thinks that the House is just batshit crazy.
Mhm.
It's going to be, it's kind of one of the undercovered parts of this entire new power dynamic. Is I don't think that Mitch McConnell is going to take too well when he passes a deal in the Senate and then it goes to the House and the crazies try to hijack it. Mitch McConnell's not going to put up with that kind of shit. And I think that you look at how easily McConnell was reelected as
Oh,
Republican
yeah.
leader.
Mhm.
There was no drama at all in the Senate Republican conference in terms of their leadership succession heading into this new Congress. And that stability is, I think, going to be something that really the entire country is going to lean on. I mean, for all of the things that I have against Mitch McConnell, he's pragmatic,
Mhm.
and he's not going to want to see the government shut down over Lauren Boebert and Matt
Yeah.
Gates's, the idea that McConnell could in any way stomach those people trying to hold hostage governing over him. I don't think that's going to fly.
Yeah. One of the things I'm most concerned about against this entire backdrop of Republicans in the House and showing their true colors and is that the American people will still vote for Republicans come 2024. I mean, in 2022, someone like Herschel Walker lost by slightly more than I think it was
Hmm.
100,000 votes, and if it was on the other hand, I think Michael Steele said this on MSNBC that night. They really could have won and beat Reverend Warnock. I'm wondering what you think will take to get Americans to realize what Republicans are trying to do to our country. I mean, it's like if people don't wake up now, like when will they?
Yeah, I don't know that they will. I think that the majority of people in this country tune out the day to day back and forth stuff that you and I are engaged in
Yeah.
constantly. I think that they're all just trying to live their lives
Mhm,
and
mhm.
and do the best that they can. I think that the Democratic Party certainly needs to continue investing in diversifying their outreach.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether it's communities of color, whether it's
Mhm,
younger voters. I think that's
mhm,
really
mhm.
the best opportunity we have as a party to succeed and grow, is focusing on the places that Republicans tend to ignore.
Yeah.
And we saw that that youth turnout and the minority turnout was the difference maker in this election.
Mhm.
And continuing to invest in doing that type of outreach and coalition development, I think, is crucial for the Democratic Party in 2024.
Absolutely. In that same vein, I actually want to ask you as the last question, do you have any thoughts on what's happening in 2024? After last week, there was a lot of speculation that the person who stands to benefit from this on the Republican side is Ron DeSantis. And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the Republican race and how that's shaping out to look in 2024.
I think that the agenda that Republicans in Congress are pursuing actually benefits Donald Trump, because they're
Hmm.
going right into his wheelhouse of, the swamp is something you can't trust, and all these conspiracy theories about Hunter Biden and all of these
Yeah,
things that
yeah.
they're going to shine a spotlight on. That's really vintage Donald Trump.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think that Trump benefits from that because his allies, like Jim Jordan, like Kevin McCarthy, in some ways, they're going to do Trump's job for him in terms of
Yeah, yeah.
elevating the kind of core issues that he tends to focus on and the grievances that he tends to focus on. So I really think that DeSantis's challenge will be he doesn't really have a lane here in
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
conversation, and Trump does. And so it'll be interesting to see how DeSantis tries to navigate that. But
Yeah.
I've said for a while, I don't think that there's an off ramp from Trump yet for Republicans, and certainly they haven't been willing to take one when one has emerged. And so I expect Donald Trump to be the Republican nominee.
I mean, it's telling that Kevin McCarthy, the first person who he thanked after his vote, was none other than Donald Trump. So
Right.
even though Donald Trump had no role in helping him get elected as speaker, so it's yeah. I mean, I think he still has a big role. I mean, do you think? he's losing support though, or does he still kind of maintain that 30-40% of the Republican base that he always claims to have?
He might be losing some support on some of the margins, but I still think that
Yeah.
ultimately the hardcore base of the Republican Party loves the guy.
Hmm. Well, okay, we have to somehow change that in the next couple of years before 2024. Kurt Bardella, thank you so much for joining. It was so great to see you this morning, and we will all be looking forward to what you have to say in the coming months and years to come.
All right, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. Well, that was a wonderful episode. Kurt is always a powerful voice. Earlier, I mentioned the Trump Organization and their sentence, or not maybe they're not their sentence, but their fine of $1.6 million, which I think is some significant news. Again, it's really nothing for an organization as big as the Trump Organization, but it's still significant in the sense that I think accountability really does matter here. That's the max sentencing under New York state law. We can talk about maybe if there's some reforms that need to be happen so that big organizations face bigger penalties. But I think this is important. And hopefully now Jack Smith picks up the investigation and hopefully Letitia James, Fannie Willis in Georgia. There are so many investigations into Trump right now. And so hopefully hopefully Trump himself can be held accountable in the coming weeks to come. Speaking of investigations, there is a new special counsel. His name is Robert Hur. He was a U.S. attorney in Maryland, a Trump appointee who got unanimous support in the Senate when he was nominated. He's a Korean American, I think has an interesting background, and he's been named the special counsel for the Biden special documents case. And it seems like, a lot of legal analysts, I don't pretend to be a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like a lot of legal analysts think this is going to be a quick case. Right now we're seeing witnesses come forward. It's very different from the Trump case. Sure, it's, all related to classified information, and we can say that none of them should have had that. And I think there should be some reforms in the law. But when it comes to the willingness of President Biden and his witnesses to come forward, return the documents, it's just really different from the Trump case. And the Trump case involves one, I think, key distinguishing element, which is obstruction. And I think that's kind of where that key difference lies. And, for Robert Hur, I think this is going to be a quick investigation. Andrew Weissman, who I know we have all seen on Twitter, has argued that this is actually only going to enhance and help Jack Smith's eventual prosecution of Trump, hopefully. And so we'll all be watching what happens there. But that is, now we have two special counsels, not just one. And next week we'll still be keeping an eye out on what happens in the House. This week again we saw just this complete, I think, tell of what the Republican Party is trying to do with their votes on restricting abortion, with their votes on forming this weaponization of government subcommittee. I mean, it's all really concerning, and so we'll all be keeping our eyes on the House of Representatives. In the meantime, I hope you will tune back in next week. We have a packed slate of people, including people like SD Cup, Marcus Flowers from down in Georgia, Chris Boozy, who has this new social media platform, Stuart Stevens. We have a great lineup of guests next week, and I can't wait for you all to come and listen to them and hear what they have to say. It's going to be a very exciting week. We'll be back next week, every weekday, with another episode of On the Move, exactly at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. You don't want to miss them. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell for our daily notifications so you don't miss an episode. Have a great weekend. Have a safe weekend. And I will see you back next week for On the Move.